I'm pleased to welcome Jimmy Kukulski.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So, Jimmy, just to get started here, as the president of Elite Lubrication Specialties, what does Elite do, and why are they different in this industry?
Well, Mike, Elite is started about 3 years ago. I incorporated, and I did that specifically because I saw holes in the industry and what certain consulting agencies and other firms offered. About 6 years ago, I started with Lubrication Engineers as just an outside sales, independent outside sales. And at the time, Noria and Lubrication Engineers were kind of partnering together. You had Reliability Web coming out. So a lot of reliability-focused consulting was starting to really blossom and bloom and get into the space of maintenance 4.0. Some IIoT stuff, lots of vibration, ultrasound, companies like STT. And I noticed at a certain point where we were trying to merge the things that Noria was trying to do with the things that the lubricant manufacturers were doing, specifically Lubrication Engineers, there was a lot of vacuum space. There was focuses on certain points and parts of proactive and some predictive, like oil analysis obviously went really well with it. But they didn't really talk a lot about or focus on ultrasound or vibration or magneto or resonance or a bunch of other things. And so 3 years ago when I incorporated, I had with the sole purpose basically to fill those voids. So basically, how we did that is we took ISO 55000 suite, which is 55000, 55001, 55002. We thoroughly went over that and we vetted, should we become an auditor, should we do this, should we do that? We basically just use it as a foundation to build programs inside manufacturing, power generation, and fleets. And we do that mostly with lubrication best practice, maintenance best practice, and then we try to switch PDM or preventative maintenance strategies. So OEM oil changes, OEM greasing intervals, and then set it, forget it type stuff, to proactive. So we use premium lubricants. We look at the way the machine is maintained, how the process is done, and then obviously predictive analytics. And then we implement that. So we push it from a OEM standpoint, like they tell you when to change the oil, they tell you when to change a belt or to do balancing, to a condition based. But I really see that people are the difference implementing these programs. I mean, you go to a reliability show, there are what, 200 or 300 companies that offer some type of reliability. It's kind of like the catchphrase now, reliability this, reliability that. It's a big deal and it can make differences, but when you don't guide it properly, don't execute it, it never gets done, or it just kind of flutters out, right? And so Elite really focuses on filling the holes to be able to execute those programs properly.
So what are some of the top pain points that these different customers are experiencing, and I mean, what are you hearing in the industry from them?
I think that's there's two ways you can look at that question, okay? So if I'm a person who works in a manufacturing plant, and it doesn't matter if you're in the C-suite all the way down to the guy who mops the floors, you see problems in your manufacturing plant, and they're unique to your perspective on that process, right? So let's say I'm a mechanic. I might be working on one machine that's always down, but if I'm in the process side of things, I'm looking at, hey, this machine's too slow. Well, because maintenance and operations are always kind of head to head. Operations has to put stuff out the door, maintenance has to keep things up. So sometimes maintenance will turn a machine down or whatever. But those things are all determined on their perspective. But if you move outside of that and you look at it from, let's say, a cultural perspective, like for me, the biggest pain point in every single location I go to is the culture, the people. So it's really, really difficult to change a culture. Like if I see a broken machine, I can change the machine out with relative ease, depending on the asset. I can maintain an asset differently. I can do predictive analytics. I can have an algorithm tell me what to do. But when you do that to a person, it's a whole different animal. So change management, performance management, organizational development is really the hidden key to making everything else work really well. Performance management and everything around it has to do with process and asset management, right? You have two types of assets in your plant. You have the assets, the hard assets that create products, and then you have the people. And I think a lot of times people forget that people are the only really appreciating asset that a company has. Like if you work for one more day for Augury, you're worth more than you were yesterday. Typically, right?
Yeah.
So where the land might be worth more, but like this sofa we're sitting on is worth less every day. Every computer in here is worth less. It's the same for every place. So if you get focused on just looking at the hard assets that are depreciating, you forget about the assets that are appreciating, your human asset, then I think you miss it. And for me, that's the biggest pain point, is the merging of those two together. So the first thing we do is do the overall process, like an audit, right? So we'll go in, we'll look at the top to bottom, not just the assets themselves, but the people. How does operations versus maintenance work together? Do they have superordinate goals? We look at the people part, like I said, is really important, and the asset part. I'll definitely check out the oil room. I'll see if they have vibration, if they have predictive analytics. I want to know all that. So we'll take that together. I will take that to my office, and we'll come up with kind of an overview audit, right? These are some things that we can start to move in. And then we start to look into getting into the more switching from reactive and preventative maintenance strategies, and we start to talk about getting to the weeds on the more predictive. So then we do the stuff like what Augury does with vibration, not just the halo, but the site-to-site with the Augscope. And that really starts to kick that in gear, right? So we've made improvements, relatively inexpensive ones that are easy to implement, and then we move over to the stuff that actually just forces more return on asset into that proactive. Because really a top to bottom strategy can't have a proactive maintenance strategy without the predictive. You actually lose a lot of your proactive leverage if you don't have the predictive analytics included.
So how do you think, you had mentioned a couple different new technologies that you're utilizing for your customers. How do you think emerging technologies will change the face of maintenance at these facilities?
Well, the first thing it'll do is if you bring in any technology, if it's a coreless grease gun, if it's an ultrasonic unit, if it's Auguscope, if it's a halo, you're going to turn interest on in certain people, okay? And the difference between, and I already kind of went over this a little bit, but the difference between a successful program and one that just falls on its face is execution. And the easiest way to execute a program is to have a champion involved, right? So you have somebody who has interest, and there's actually change management program based on this. You get people's acceptance, and you get them to dive in and have interest in the program. And if you have that champion, now management understands that the champion is doing something, and he's proving things to them. So you're empowering a person, an individual inside the manufacturing facility or inside the power plant, to use a tool to increase profits. I mean, that's really what it's about, is EBIT, right? Earnings before interest and tax. That's all those people are concerned about. So if you bring a champion, a tool, let's say Auguscope or a halo, or some type of grease gun that measures how much grease is going in, or a greasing calculator, a fluid calculator, or an online oil analysis tool. Any of those things actually help people who care, that are doing their proper job at that facility, to do things better and more actively. What it also does is it separates the wheat from the chaff. So if you have the biggest enemy to this stuff is the hero. The guy who likes to come in at 3 o'clock in the morning and get paid double time to fix a machine. The champions that take the technologies we bring in and use them to basically multiply themselves, multiply their champion effort, they overshadow the hero and make the plant more effective and more efficient. Balance, and champions are rare. You know that, right? It's not easy to find the champion, the guy who's excited about doing stuff like that. It's almost all heroes and people who aren't looking to make the facilities better. So that's really the difficult tipping scale, like where you're trying to get past a certain point. You're trying to find that champion.
So tell me a little bit about a scenario where maybe you have a champion. You have, the champion, he's bought into the idea of this technology. He understands the benefit and wants to kind of bring it. But the plant or the facility is hesitant to spend money on a newer technology that's new to the field, maybe not proven in their industry just yet. How do you handle that?
When you have a champion or somebody on staff in a company that is doing relatively well before they've gotten to that point of no return, on your PF curve, way to the right, because the whole company could be on the PF curve too, right? The most important thing is to empower the people that look like they could be champions. The people that have the interest and that have the capability to understand the technology of what you're doing. You can taste it in the air when they get excited about something, right? Like, hey, this is something we did over there, or this customer called me from a different company. Like I said, they've moved because I've networked through one area. They've gone to another area, and they call me in, and they're the champion for that place, right? And I go in and just kind of feel the room, and you kind of have to just be patient and empower them to have a success somewhere.
Okay. So I guess you're coming into these companies, right? You have your champion. You're even finding that sometimes the response is they're accepting maybe of these technologies, but there's always that initial step of introducing the technology to the facility, right? Can you walk me through your process on doing that?
Well, there's a few different ways depending on the size of the company. If it's somebody like the CEO or a VP that's bringing us in of operations, or VP of maintenance or maintenance manager, we would typically go through the program, go over a process, do a walk through the plant, talk to different people inside the manufacturing plant, and then get an idea of what their largest maybe reactive side is. So let's say one asset's down all the time. We'll definitely focus on that first, right? So that'd be an easy way to be able to implement that. But if let's say it's a tech that worked at a different company, and we did a full program at, let's say, company A, and he moves to company B, and he's like, oh man, we did this over there, and this happened, and so we're gonna do something a little bit different. We'll do a presentation based on, what we see in the manufacturing, do a free audit, and then maybe implement little bits and pieces or minimums for our ROA, right? To be able to go in and make those changes and help implement the best practices that are going to kind of snowball into something bigger and better for the customer in the long run.
Mm-hmm. If you walk into a customer of yours, right, and you could tell a maintenance technician just one thing that they could do differently to help benefit maybe their PMs or maintenance, uptime of their critical machinery, what would that one thing be?
I'd say learn something new every week. That would be the number one thing. I mean, obviously that's not like something you can implement. If I go in and tell you to do that, you're not, what does that even mean?
Yeah, exactly.
But really, improve yourself as a person, because if you're a more whole human being, you're gonna do a better job, right? If you're having problems at home, like that's gonna affect your work, and that could make you unsafe and could get you hurt. The second thing is, I would say pay attention. Like if you're out on a job site, then you can't pay attention to your surroundings, you don't belong there.
When it comes to your customers, if you could have your cake and eat it too, right? Your pie in the sky dream. Money's not an issue. What program would you want to put in place? Like, what is your dream program?
ISO 55000, 55001, 55002. It's everything that I've talked about so far with today is really based on that. The bulk of 55,000 is management and culture. It really is. Like if you go through that, most of it is spent on how do you run this company? How do you run these assets? How do you manage these assets? And so if I was sitting in my office or in my car and somebody called me and it was the call of the dream call, it would be, hey, I want you to come here and implement 55,000 top to bottom. And that would be a dream, because it would take every skill I have and everything I'm trying to do for my customers. Because right now, there's only 3 ISO 55001 plants in the country. 3, that's it. That's a culture problem. Yeah. That's not an implementation problem. There's plenty of tools. Like I said, you go to any reliability conference, how many tools are there to help you get better? They're all there because they did something for somebody. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't exist if they didn't, right? So there's plenty of ways to make your company better. Why aren't companies getting better? It's culture. So we go back to, hey, bypass that, implement it top to bottom. We can do a cultural, we can do organizational development, we can change your performance management, we can change your change management, we can actually do this process top to bottom, C-suite down to the guy who mops the floors, and get to the assets, and the company will run like a Swiss watch.
And I'm guessing that tied to a lot of the technology that you're incorporating into it. It's changing that culture, but allowing them to change and accept some of the technologies that you're helping to bring this maintenance 4.0.
It kind of has to go hand in hand. You can give a person a tool, but if they don't want to use it, they're not going to, right? So if they have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But let's say they're bolts they're trying to tighten. It's not the, you're not gonna do anything. But if that's all they've ever done, if you don't guide them through that process, that's really what change management is about. Is helping people, helping that culture develop into a culture of asset management, helping them be safe, helping them enjoy their jobs, helping them feel like they're included in this process of making this thing better.
Jimmy, if you were to fast forward 10 years in the industry, what do you think that looks like for these advanced solutions?
I think the stuff that we do today will be applications on your phone. They'll be so inexpensive because production has ramped up and the prices of stuff have come down, and we will be in a different space of IoT. I mean, I know Moore's Law is kind of slowing down a little bit, but it's kind of expedited in other places like battery management and everything else. So I think what we're going to see is more dark plants. Like Elon Musk's dream plant will be commonplace. Most everything will be automated, not just to get rid of workers and cost things less, but it's because it's more efficient, it's safer, and we will see a lot more of this, but on everything. Everything that moves, maybe even the way people interact with each other will have sensors on that. I actually talked to a company that was developing IoT strategies for the healthcare industry. And my wife and I had a conversation in the car after I had that conversation with that person, and they want to monitor what people are like, right? So personality, so that culture part, I really think that people are going to try to manage culture and change with AI.
Well, Jimmy, really thank you so much for your time, your knowledge. Really interesting to hear about how you're really joining company culture along with lubrication, specialties, along with vibration, and really allowing to change the maintenance practices at your customers. Really appreciate your time talking through it, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.